My name is James Trost, and this is A2 Insight. Today's guest is Ann Arbor Mayor Christopher Taylor. Mayor Taylor, welcome to A2 Insight.
Pleasure to be here.
Well, we're very pleased to have you.
Thank you.
I'd like to start out with, for our viewers, just to get a sense of who you are, where you grew up,
Sure.
your family influences, and let's get you all the way into Ann Arbor and up to your initial interest in local government politics.
All
So
right.
why don't you start out and give us your life history?
It's a long, fair enough. It'll be just like that.
Okay.
So I was born in New York City. My parents are New Yorkers. My family's New Yorkers. Grew up there, probably with a little detour to Oakland when my dad was in the Navy till I was 9. Then moved to the suburbs of Chicago. Lived there till I was 16. I went to high school up for 2 years at the Interlochen Arts Academy to help develop an interest in music and theater. Came down here to the Ann Arbor at the University of Michigan in 1985 to the music school, as was. And I have a vocal performance degree from the music school. Along the way, I went to got an English degree, a history degree, and then eventually went to law school. I was interested in American legal history. Decided eventually to become a lawyer. My wife and I, we actually met up at summer camp back when at Interlochen. We re-met here in college. College, I was active in the Intercooperative Council, the housing co-ops. I was president of the housing cooperatives, which was an important and exciting time. It's great having people work together, to build housing for themselves, to take care of housing for themselves, to serve meals. It was a great thing as a student. We went to Boston for a couple of years. Then back in 2002, we came on back and been here ever since. With respect to politics, I've always been interested in government and politics and things like that, but never really envisioned myself participating until one day in March of 2008. I was having brunch at a friend's house, and we were talking about politics and state politics and so forth, a little local. And he said, "Why don't you run for city council?" I was like, I can never do that. And he asked me, well, why could I never do that? And I told him my reasons, and he said, those reasons don't make any sense at all. Here's why you can do it. Here's why you should do it. Think about it. 4 weeks later, I was on the ballot. 4 months later, I'd won the primary, and that was that.
So you've been a fixture in our community since 2008 as it relates to local politics, which leads us to, let's go start with your first term here as mayor of Ann Arbor. For those of you who don't know, Mayor Taylor is running for his second term, or is it third? I'm trying to.
Yeah, it's a little complicated. This will be, if elected, this would be my third term, but it would be a 4-year term. The previous 2 terms have been 2-year terms.
Now, given that reality, what do you think for the first 2 terms of your term, the first 2 years, and we are running for a 4-year term this time, what would you say in the past 4 years, let's get away from the terms, what would you say have been your major accomplishments having been our mayor for the past 4 years?
Right. Well, I think we've had a lot of good things happen in the city. We have, first off, spent, over the course of this time, millions of dollars more every single year on our roads. Our roads are, of course, in terrible shape. Michigan has been 50th out of 50 in road spending for a long, long time. I think we're now up to 46. And we get most of our road money from the state, but still, we're putting millions more in, and that has been that's been a positive development. We're also spending millions more, have spent millions more on our stormwater system. We have areas throughout the community that experience flooding. We have a stormwater system that wasn't designed for the current environment. Climate change is real. We get 40% more precipitation in the city than we used to. That's 40 Michigan stadiums filled with water extra, dumped throughout Ann Arbor. And we have a system that's not designed for that. And so we need to adjust, we need to improve and be smart about how we do it and expand funding. We've also been able to, fully fund our urban forestry management plan. We haven't been able to do that in the past, but now we're able to do it. We're planting 1,000 new street trees every year. We're putting all of our street trees on a regular pruning cycle. If your tree needs addressing, we are able to address it. I think that's really some exciting stuff. Also, on the sustainability side, we have taken real and meaningful action with respect to 1,4-dioxin. That is obviously a problem that dates all the way back to the 1980s. State law has been against us for decades now, since the Engler administration. But what we've been able to do is get the Department of Environmental Quality to strengthen the drinking water standard, dropping it down from 85 parts per billion to 7.2 parts per billion. That's enabled us to go into court. We're now fighting the polluter alongside the county, alongside Scioto Township, which really has, Scioto Township, which is, of course, ground zero for the plume. And I think importantly, the Huron River Watershed Council. The four of us are aligned. We are working to make sure that the polluter pays and accelerates cleanup and enhances monitoring. We also have engagement, I'm delighted to say, by the EPA. They are monitoring what's going on. They're working with us, reporting to us, and they have a staff member engaged. And so this is, these are some of the good things that we're doing.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's encouraging. I have to give you a break on this because this issue has gone on for decades. And as I said, I can remember back in 1973 we were dealing with potholes. And I hear it's the weather. I hear we don't want to spend the money. There's certain technologies that can deal with these potholes, but you're never going to hear the end of that. I guess that would just be the thing, and but I'm glad to see we're putting more money and that the state is putting more, because I do think this is an issue, because it's like traversing a minefield sometimes for those of us,
Absolutely, and it's not just that we're spending more money. Starting this year, we're spending money smarter, and that's something I'm really excited about. We, just like it's a bad idea for us to have our health care at the ER, that's how we've been treating our roads. We've been letting them go to failure and then treating them. We've got to well visit our roads. So we are spending a lot more money patching, sealing, resurfacing, and you're starting to see that throughout, you're starting to see that already throughout the community. Right now, about 30% of our roads are good and excellent. And that's far from good or excellent. That's going to tick up about 10% each year till 2025, when 80% of our roads are going to be good and excellent. That's something that I'm really excited about. I think people will see that change. It's a result of us taking a new approach to our roads. It'll take some time and continued investment, and I'm committed to that.
Well, and as you know, I'm sure you hear it all the time. This is, as I said, this is an issue that doesn't go away. And however, at the same time, Mayor Taylor, we have several other issues that I'd like to discuss with you now that never seem to be they never end, they continue. And you're at the helm now of this, and so I want to go through just a couple of projects that we are dealing with now that have evolutionary, even in the last few weeks. So why don't we start with the program that are the issue, and that would be, let's say combined, the core spaces, library lot, and the now newly repurchased Y lot, and what you envision was going to happen, or what you hope to do with these properties now that we still seem to have potential but not necessarily resolution to either one. So good luck on that.
Thank you. I think it's important that we do move forward on these things. So with respect to the library lot, the library lot has for years, and this goes back all the way to the aughts when we spent millions of dollars to build a parking structure that could support a larger building there. So for years, it's been envisioned that there's going to be a building at that location. It's, I think, what what we as a whole community need. It's certainly what the library is looking for. They don't want sort of an open space next to them. They want as many people there as often as possible there, and you get that with a structure. It's kind of a that location is really for years been kind of a dead zone between State Street and Main Street, and I think it's important to all of us that we activate it. So, we have, 2 years ago, I guess now, or a year and change ago now, passed a resolution to sell the air rights to a developer. That sale, contract has been signed, and I believe will eventually go through. What that's going to mean is the construction of of a building there. It's going to be there'll be hotel, there'll be office, there'll be residential. There'll also be a 12,000 square foot plaza in front with splash pad style amenities. That sale is for $10 million. The $10 million is allocated as follows. $5 million will go to our affordable housing fund, which is really important in my view. Affordable housing, if you ask me, and you're probably going to get to that, affordable housing and affordability is our challenge going forward. That's at the core of what's holding Ann Arbor back from being the community we want. That $5 million is suitable to enable the city to help build, to really get off the ground between 200 and 500 units of new permanent affordable housing throughout the city. 200 to 500 units. That comes from our Housing Commission executive director. That's incredibly important. Would be really meaningful to obviously the people who live in those units, but also to the rest of the community. The other $5 million from the sale of the air rights is going to go to pay off the loan that we took out to buy the Y lot. The Y lot is the area right next to the bus station presently. There's a lot of history on that. I don't know if you want all the history. I've got it if you want it.
Well,
but,
there's a lot.
Let's cut down on the history.
It was the Y. It was torn down. It was used for various housing issues.
Yeah.
Let's just deal with going forward. You purchased the lot for $5 million back for the owner of the property, Mr. Dahlman. And now you have it back. It is owned by the city. What do you want to do with it next?
Sure. And we purchased it back for $5 million. I guess I'll put a little history in there. The reason we were able to purchase it is because we had put in a deed restriction. The deed restriction obligated the gentleman to build the structure he promised by November of 2018. He did not even propose the structure that was promised, and so as a consequence, we had a right to buy this site back at $4.2 million. We prior to, he sued us along the way. When we had an opportunity to trigger that right in April, in April of 2018, a number of council members declined to exercise that right, and so we were not able to do so. That gave him another claim in his suit. We ended up, the claim was that we had waived that right somehow. We ended up along the way, settling that suit at $5.2 million rather than the 4.2. Anyway, we have the property. Going forward, here's what here's my vision for it. I'm open because it's not my property; it's a community property. But I would like to see a couple of things there. First, I really want to explore whether that can be used for public purpose. That is, I know that the library is interested in that site. I know that AAA TA is interested in utilizing some of that site for extra lanes to help support public transportation. Supporting the library, supporting public transportation, partnering with those organizations would be incredibly useful and activating, I believe. So if we could work with them on the first couple of stories and then put affordable housing up top, I think that would be a win for everybody. So my vision is to explore partnering with library, explore partnering with AAA TA, explore building affordable housing above. I think that'd be wonderful.
All right. Well, I mean that's encouraging. I mean everyone's talking about it. Everyone I've interviewed, everyone talks about affordable housing and how it's sustainable. And I'm going to go back to that because I think it really is the major issue that everyone's talking about, whether it be other council members or other folks I've talked to. But let's move on to another issue that's before we get to that, and that would be the Amtrak station or the. They said this thing is an interesting story to say the least. Whether it be you got people trying not to get information, you've got the council members who are trying to get access to if we don't know what's going on. Federal government says we didn't do the due diligence. All these horror stories. But I guess the question is, is this a necessary movement for our community? We've done, I don't know how many years of study of this, but do you believe that there can be some resolution to this, and is it going to be Fuller Station? Where do you hope to expand commuter rail in this community, and is it going to happen?
Fundamentally, Ann Arbor needs better rail service. The only way to get better rail service is through a new train station. I think that is a simple truth. The current station is inadequate for its current purpose. Amtrak anticipates ridership increasing 10x over the next 30 years. Even if that's off by 5, that's a doubling. Our station simply can't handle that right now. Further, you've mentioned commuter rail. Commuter rail is incredibly important to the quality of life of the people in the city. The University of Michigan is not going to be shedding too many jobs. People are going to be coming into the city to work. They're going to either drive in or they're going to take the train in. And I want them taking the train in. Commuter rail is critically important on that east-west corridor. The only way to enable that to happen, a necessary condition for us getting commuter rail service in Ann Arbor is to have a train station adequate to service it. And that can only be done, both those things can only be done, expansion and commuter rail service, at the Fuller Road site. There are other conditions that are necessary in order to get that off the ground too, but those are both gating items, and so we need to do it. With respect to where we are in the process, we are working with the Federal Rail Administration to get an environmental assessment finalized. It has been a long and miserable process working with the government on this. There's no denying it, and I don't, I've gotten out of the prediction business as when it's going to happen, but I very much believe it will happen because it needs to happen. The location of the station at Fuller is proper. There's no room at Depot for the parking. There's no room for the last mile transit to get in and out, to get people from that station to other places where they need to go. The proper site is, for all those purposes, is Fuller. We'll need to fix the Fuller Maiden Lane intersection. We know it, and there's no question that that intersection would be fixed and improved for the purpose of supporting its station long before a station ever arrives there.
Well, that I think that's important because we don't have the traffic down there. I mean, is a nightmare during rush hour either way.
Yeah, we want people walking, biking, and goodness, taking the train, and that I think would be a win for absolutely everybody. And the only way to do that is get a station that works.
Well, one of the things everyone also talks about in this community is development.
Yep.
Development here, development there. And then how do we do it? People don't want skyscrapers. Some people say they do. We don't have any space. People are building in Saline. We can't get housing, and the prices keeps going up. What about this new idea of DTE and the movement along? I mentioned a couple of people. I lived in Minneapolis for many years, and waterfront is a wonderful, the idea that someday, and again, I don't know where you stand on this, that you could actually go to dinner at a restaurant and actually sit on a patio when you're next to the Huron River. We are river people.
We are.
So, and I don't know, as I said, this is a private potential development, but of course, obviously, all the zoning and all the issue would come before the council, I would assume, in this specific location. Is this something you've been thinking about or interested in, or is there a problem with the location, whether it be some kind of environmental issues, or what about this DTE movement or development?
Sure. Well, DTE has long owned the property down by the river near the present train station, and for years have been kind of holding it in abeyance, figuring out what we're going kind of waiting for us to make movement, waiting for the Federal Rail Administration to have movement as to what
they're co-linked.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, okay.
Yes, because until the FRA says, yes, Fuller Road is the proper site or Depot Street is the proper site, DTE is not going to move.
Okay.
Federal Rail Administration has, although the environmental assessment is not finalized, has, for all practical purposes, ratified Fuller Road as the proper site for a train station. As a consequence, DTE, it appears, is comfortable moving forward, developing the site it owns down there. There are, you mentioned environmental cleanup, and there's going to be a lot of environmental cleanup down there, and they're going to do it, and thank you. Their goal is to, as I understand it, is to build a site which includes, a great deal of public open space, includes some retail and some residential. How that all gets played out, it is still a topic of conversation. I would be excited to have an activating, an appropriate activating, set of structures development by the river. I think that would be great for us. It would open it up to the public in a way that it isn't presently. It needs to be right. It needs to be sensitive to the location, sensitive to the proximate residents. But I'm excited by the prospect. Excited that DTE is interested in doing something that makes them proud. I think that they view this as an opportunity to showcase their neighborliness, their community spirit, and I'm excited to work with them on it.
Oh, well, that is encouraging. As I said, we mentioned earlier that this really is a different election because we're running for a 4-year term, but you also are running against an opponent. This is not just you have an opponent who's running for them, and I will be talking next week to you, Jack Eden, who is contesting, and you both are running. And I really like to see what are the different visions that you have. I mean, I don't want to. There's enough acrimony in politics anyway. But I like to say this: what do you believe that you bring to the table that would be more advantageous to this community in the next 4 years than your opponent, in terms of your vision for the future, that would be different than his taking leadership of this community? How would you respond to that?
I think that I'm excited by the future. I came here in 1985, and I loved it then, and I like all of us who've been here for a long time, I'm nostalgic about the past, and I miss the past. But I am also excited about what we're doing now, and really excited about what we can do in the future. I think that Ann Arbor, it has a, I think that we're an optimistic community. I think that we benefit by optimism. I think that that I bring that enthusiasm. I think I bring an optimism to the council. I think I bring careful, thoughtful leadership to the council and the community. I think people rely upon me to to think through issues and to articulate them reliably, and to to have a full faith and belief in what we can do together to make Ann Arbor a better place. I want us to work together. We have common aspirations. We're not perfect. We're far from it, and we have lots of places we want to go, but we can only get there together if we're active, engaged, and positive.
All right. Well, then I guess that does lead to some of the issues. It's not just your level of government, but certainly the federal government and state level. And our community has its own share of factions, as I would see doing the various debates. You could come to on the winning end of these things, but there are factions, and there are different views, and then these things are tough. As mayor, you've experienced that, dealing with the variety of council members and trying to get your things across. Do you see something, and again, you talk about being collaborative, would you envision anything different, not only by being elected for a 4-year term, but also the potential makeup of the council that will become less acrimonious, or hopefully we'd be able to get more things done that you've seen from your first 4 year, because this is this is true of all levels of government. I mean, it's not to deny that anybody's positions are better, but it is a compromise. Politics is the art of compromise.
Sure.
So how do you envision the difference of the last 4 years in terms of your leadership leading the council, and what you hope to see maybe that you've learned over the past 4 years that you might be able to implement going forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the way that if you're not interested in acrimony, don't be acrimonious. If as a voter you're not interested in an acrimonious government, don't elect people who are who thrive on anger. Elect people who thrive on positivity, who seek to engender optimism, who are open to engagement. I think that is your charge as a voter. For my part, getting along with people, whether they agree with me or disagree with me, is absolutely critical. People who come to city council and throw me praise, at the podium, get the same treatment as people who swear at me. I listen to them carefully. I thank them, as is my role, as is proper with my role for their public comment. I listen to what they say. With respect to all the different council members, this is something I started at the very beginning. Before every council meeting, I make a point, and I succeed in shaking hands with every single council member that's there at the opening bell. I make sure I go over to them. I say hello to them. I try to have some sort of human engagement with them. This is even the people that have sued me. I think irrationally, but nevertheless, we're still there. This is our role. This is the proper thing to do. It's important that we recognize, our common humanity, our common purpose, and that we don't let policy disagreements get in the way of that.
All right. Well, that sounds encouraging.
Yeah.
Let's move on to just one more issue, and then we'll get to my final question. But that would again go back to affordable housing. And I said I know that it's such a hard thing to, I think, structure in many ways, because you're not only are you dealing with the reality, I as a homeowner would want my property values to increase, and therefore that happens by the way the market certainly is designed, the lack of growth, and for a variety of reasons. But then the issue of finance, it seems to me it's a funding issue. I mean, there's nothing, it's great to have different socioeconomic groups of people and people who actually work in Ann Arbor, the service, can actually live here, which we don't have right now. But then the problem is, we don't want to ghettoize people downtown either. I mean, this seems to me that the greatest aspect would be different areas where we would have folks in affordable housing, because I think that the denseness of the concentration, that's not necessarily providing the variety of locations. And we've got Avalon House, we've got the other things. You've also taken a portion of them. I talked to Sheriff Clayton about this whole millage aspect. So you're really invested and planning on investing financial resource in this, but how do we know that those are going to last more than a couple of years to get this thing really going? Because is it sustainable to continue this subsidization for affordable housing particularly?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And you mentioned some of the, you allude to a lot of the tensions that we have. You know, as property owners, we like it when we like it that our properties increase in value. But at the same time, we know that creates affordability problems, you know, for ourselves if we want to move within the community. But it also means that people have a hard time buying in, and we want Ann Arbor to be here for everyone. And so, you know, there is that tension. I think what we can do to address that tension is to accept well, that supply and demand isn't a joke. You know, supply and demand is real. And for years, we've put a cap on the supply of housing in the city. As a consequence, in the face of substantial demand, in the face of 6,000 new students from the university, in the absence of university new housing, we've had an increase in prices, and that has consequences. I think what we need to do as a community is to actually invest in affordable housing, and I think that's one thing that distinguishes me. I have committed to doing that with the purchase of the library lot, and if that is scuttled, then we won't have that money. You mentioned the millage. The county, we all passed a community mental health public safety rebate millage. Every single dollar from Ann Arbor that is allocated for community mental health is going to go to community mental health, full stop. Every single dollar that's allocated to the sheriff is going to go to the sheriff, full stop. But because we already have a police department, the county thought that it would be unfair to ask us to double tax ourselves for the sheriff that works mostly outside the city, and also ourselves for the police department that works inside the city. And so for jurisdictions that have police departments, there's a rebate from that millage. That rebate is unallocated, intended for the jurisdiction to use for whatever purpose it wants. That was in the ballot language. Further, council, with my instigation, said, all right, before the vote, we're going to promise the voters how we're going to use that rebate. You shouldn't go to the polls and not know what we're going to do. We're going to tell you what we're going to do. We're going to get about $2.3, $2.4 million a year from the rebate. 20% of that is going to go to pedestrian safety. People are trying to walk more. They want to be safe. We want them to be safe. Better designed crosswalks, street lights, flashing lights, those sorts of things. Crosswalk stripings. 40% to fund, climate action. We as a community, we can do meaningful things to improve how we engage the changing climate, to reduce our community's greenhouse gas emissions if we have the resources to do it. We've not in the past. We have a great climate action plan, but no funding. This will fund it. And finally, 40% for affordable housing. Over the next 8 years, approximately $8 million is going to go to fund affordable housing projects. And that's just not, operating funds. That is money that would be used to help folks like Avalon and other, developers throughout the community who are interested in building affordable housing, permanent affordable housing, help them gap fill their financing, a down payment help here, down payment help there, that sort of thing, to enable them to build new permanent affordable housing throughout the community. We have hundreds, thousands of units with the Ann Arbor Housing Commission. We've been investing millions of dollars, $40 million over the past 4 years, I believe, through the RAD conversion process to make sure that those projects, that those buildings and homes are well maintained. And that's been a tremendous success. Our public housing, is refurbished. It's energy efficient. It's clean. It's ready for the next 30 years. Now, we need to do the same for for other affordable housing, not necessarily owned by the city, throughout the community. We can't do it without money. We can't do it without devoting city land. I'm committed to exploring what city land can we use for this purpose. Affordability and affordable housing are they're the big challenges of the community. We passed one more thing. We passed an affordable housing needs assessment back in 2015. It was passed at 10-1 at City Council. I will say this because this is an election season. My opponent voted against adopting that as a planning document for the city. But I'm committed to it. That plan says that if we do not, that study says if we do not provide 2,800 units of new permanent affordable housing in the community over the next 20 years, we're going to have essentially permanent economic stratification in the city, permanent demographic stratification, and that's just not acceptable. We haven't had the money to do it with the sale of the library lot, with the use of the millage money proceeds, and with the use of public land. We'll be able to go a very long way towards our goal. I'm committed to working on it.
All right. Well, I've got our last question here, and I guess the question is something for you to address our viewers and ask for their vote, and just say, why should the citizens of Ann Arbor, Mayor Taylor, elect you for a 4-year term as mayor to lead our city? And I'll let you go at it.
All right. Well, if it's in talking directly to voters, I'll talk directly to the voters.
There you go.
All right. Well, so first of all, I want to thank you for thanks everybody for listening. This has been, I enjoy all these sorts of conversations and talking about our home. Bottom line is that people tell me, really wherever I go, that they, Ann Arbor's not perfect, but that they love the community, and that it's the best place they've ever lived in so many respects. And I am committed to keeping it that way. And we at City Hall, we can do that by, number one, always working on basic services, making sure that those are excellent and outstanding and ongoing. And I'm committed to doing that. First, of course, with the roads. Our roads need to improve constantly. We need to invest in them, and I'm committed to doing that. And by each and every year, we're going to improve our roads between about 10%. Are going to be more and more good and excellent. And by 2025, 80% of our roads are going to be good and excellent. And so I'm committed to doing that. We need to make sure that we continue to invest in stormwater. Neighborhood flooding is an important issue that we need to make sure that we address. But Ann Arbor is not going to be the best place you've ever lived. It's not going to be the most sustainable place you ever lived if it's not the most equitable place you've ever lived, if it's not the most sustainable place you've ever lived. And so we need to make sure that equity and sustainability are always on our minds, always something that we do. And so with respect to equity, affordable housing. We want people to be able to live in the city that don't presently live in the city. If you work in Ann Arbor, you ought to be able to live in Ann Arbor, and that's our goal. And so I'm committed to funding and building affordable housing throughout the city. That's using the proceeds from the library lot, using the millage money, using the city land for the purpose, and that's something I'm committed to doing. Also, community policing has been something that we've talked about. We have a national conversation about policing, and that has been long needed, and I'm so and we are having that here in Ann Arbor as well. It is important that people of color and other groups, that everybody understand that they believe that the Ann Arbor Police Department is there for them. Ann Arbor Police Department is it's a professional, disciplined organization. They're committed to doing their work without bias or favor. But we need to make sure that everybody understands that and believes it and has confidence in it. And we can do that with a civilian policing commission. I'm delighted that that process is moving forward. I'm committed to it. It's going to be a place of real conversation, of hard engagement between citizens, residents, and the police department. A place where police can listen to residents, understand what they're doing, where police investigations can be reviewed and discussed, where citizens and residents can come and understand what it is that the police do and why they do it. I think this will be a really important step forward.
Mayor Christopher Taylor is running for re-election for the city of Ann Arbor. The primary is on August 7th. Mayor Taylor, I want to thank you very much for being on A2 Insight. We will also give you information to contact his campaign if you want to learn more about that at the end of the show, which is coming out. So until next time, for A2 Insight, I'm James Trost.